Okay, good morning. And oh my gosh, Tom, that was the most beautiful thing. And I feel that friendship too. And it's, yeah, wow, we have built so many great relationships here. And some of them are, spanning now decades, which is pretty incredible. But one of the things that has defined, I think, this organization, Page Up, is its orientation around the future. And right now, the topic, when we get talking about what the future holds, it's AI this, AI that, and hearing what folks were saying coming out of the Page event in Half Moon Bay, it wasn't just a topic of conversation, it was the topic of conversation. So that's why we're starting off today, and it almost seems like there's a parallel world of those who are deep into AI and those who are about to be deep into AI. So I would love to introduce this amazing panel here. Joao Belo from Takeda. He's the Senior Vice President and Head of Global Communications. Joao champions an ambitious vision of communications as a true business function, dedicated to enhancing Takeda's distinctiveness and making meaningful impact on the patients it serves. Some of you, maybe many of you, have heard him recently on Think Thursdays and standalone events talking about some of the work that he and his team have been doing. We're going to hear a little bit more about that. Then my friend and colleague, April Yeu. April is the Assistant Professor of Public Relations at Boston University, so had, I think, in this room, maybe the shortest commute, apart from maybe Ken, I'm not sure. April's research includes internal public relations, leadership communications, organizational change management, corporate social responsibility, and irresponsibility. April's widely published in some of the top journals in our field, and also leads the research effort for the Organizational Communications Research Commission for the Institute for Public Relations, which is how we met when I was the director of that group with you. So thank you for your leadership there. And last and certainly not least, Dan Gaynor, who heads insights at Signal AI. And he was the founder of Kelp Data, which was acquired by Signal AI. And at Signal, which has been around for about a decade, Dan leads strategy, communications, and insights. You should also know that Dan has been both on the in-house side, I think at Nike, and then in, as I like to say, in the out-house side, in the agency world. You're at Weber, I think, as well. As somebody who also did the in-house and out-house, I feel like it's fair for me to say that. I'm, of course, the co-founder of Integral. We're an organization that looks at employees as a public. We look at employee experience, digital transformation, workplace, technologies, communications, culture, and change. Thank you for joining me for this. Joao, I want to start with a question for you, which is something that you brought up in our conversation was seeing AI over the last, call it, year and a half or so, transform in your team's use of it from a productivity tool to more of a strategic tool. Can you share a little bit about your experience with that at Takeda?
Yeah, thank you, Ethan, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and talk about this. It's been a little bit of a journey. We were lucky to, about almost 2 years ago, really, when ChatGPT started, we are lucky that our DD&T organization, so Data, Digital, and Technology organization at Takeda, immediately started to develop our own large language model, which we started to play with around the same time as ChatGPT came along. And what that did for us was, we immediately understood the possibilities in terms of productivity, right? It was a given, right? We saw the potential. We understood, all right, this is going to make a real change in terms of productivity, which then started to pop more sort of in-depth questions. And one of the things we started to think about was, all right, we measured productivity a little bit, to be honest. We started to think, right, so depending on the job descriptions, how much productivity savings we're actually thinking about. And we went, sort of numbers, all the way from more than 50%, depending on if you're sort of a writer, if you produce content, perhaps productivity gains in the realm of, 50, 60, even maybe 70%. If you do have a little bit different job, perhaps a little less than that, we landed on a sort of an average of 30% productivity gains for our entire organization. So the question is, all right, if you have a team of 100, now you have 130 people. And what does that actually mean, right? Where are you going to, these 30 new employees that you now have, what are you going to do with them, right? What are the things that they're going to be able to do? And as we were sort of going through this sort of existential questioning, one day Dan and I were actually meeting, and we, in a meeting room, I actually have a picture in my head of that meeting room, we started whiteboarding possibilities, right? And what if, hypothesis generation, right? What if we train a large language model and we build sort of a relatively complex AI system and train it on our strategy? And we are in a good position to do that because actually thanks to the work that APCO did, I know there's a lot of people here from APCO, about 4 years ago, we ran a lot of research understanding what our expectations, what our stakeholders expect from us, what do they value about Takeda, and who we are, right, our ethos. And we put it all that together into what we call the distinctive positioning, which is essentially a strategy for differentiation against other pharma companies. So we actually had a lot of material to train a large language model on. And the hypothesis was, if we train a large language model on this, can we actually build an always-on dashboard that will be looking into all our outputs as an organization? Earned coverage, social media posts, Takeda.com stories, all the outputs, and overlap that with our strategy and tell us, are we on strategy or are we not? And so we started to sort of whiteboard all of this, and it got into production in April this year. And so I think the point, kind of getting down to your question, is there's a lot more to do than just productivity. And I would say that the potential in terms of strategy and analytics is tremendous.
Dan, obviously you were involved in that project and in others. There seems to be, somewhat humble origins here. You got like a whiteboard and, ChatGPT and whatever. But what you are doing at Takeda is sophisticated, well-resourced. That's a lot going on there. What would you say, having now worked across many organizations, is like a good onboard, like what's the ramp so that you can credibly get started, but like materially be embedding AI into a communications capability?
Yeah, sure. I came to AI as a comms practitioner, right? So in global comms at Nike, the golf team wouldn't get along with the tennis team, and we needed to figure out what the story was there. At Weber Shandwick, many alumni here in the audience today, working with many companies from IBM to J&J, who are all trying to figure out, in this sea of sameness, how they can differentiate with a corporate narrative that feels truly ownable and authentic to them. And one of the things that I've seen companies do well when it comes to AI, well, there's a few key points. The first is standard setting, right? Which is to say, we are now a data-driven organization. We see this all the time in different organizations where it's like, well, I got my media monitoring tool and I've got like a volume metric, or we hate to say it, but impressions metric, or all those other old school things, but I'm pretty much just going to do my job as I see fit. I'm going to pitch the media that I think is best. I'm going to put out the messages that I think with my gut instinct sounds best. And what I think from a standard setting perspective is so important is being able to use data to make decisions that we can all rally behind as objective proof of the bets we should make, and then proof that the bets are paying off. The second thing, to Joao's point, is to talk about strategy in a way that is very, very specific, right? I think we all know as communicators, everybody here is campaigning on being perceived as an innovative company. Everyone here is being perceived as a purposeful company, and I think we've all seen, whether it's your commitment to net zero or your embrace of R&D across your organization, you need to figure out what are the most authentic proof points, what are those core values, those distinctive positioning themes that truly feel like you can own, because then you can use those to train the AI system. And then, of course, the final bit of this is synthesizing, right? It's thinking about the data points that you need to pull in. This could be global media data. This could be elite paywall data like the Financial Times or Wall Street Journal. It could be regulatory, legislative, litigation data. And thinking about the data sources you need is really important because, as you all know with an LLM, it's all based upon what's in the model. And so no matter how precisely you comb that model, the power is in the raw material that you're sourcing insight from. And so if you can be really specific in terms of setting a standard that your organization is now data-driven and making decisions with the objective proof. Second, making sure that you have a very specific strategy that you're using to shape the AI system, to sharpen your messages and improve your storytelling and quantify your editorial calendar. And most importantly, figuring out the data sources that you're going to pull from in order to make sure that the information you're getting is in fact accurate.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we're talking about getting a bunch of humans to behave differently, which is, of course, that's part of the job, right? My team at Integral has, for the last few years, I'm looking over at you, Rob Yakelik over there from Harris. We've been doing research every year with the Harris poll on employee perceptions and experience and so on. And one of the things that we've asked about is the adoption of various digital tools, AI being among them. One of the questions that we've asked is, do you think the adoption of AI is going to be good for your company? And do you think it's going to be good for you? Will it make you more productive? Will it make your company more successful? And one of the big surprises for us was the same number, 79% of people who were in our 2,000 plus person sample said, yeah, it's going to make my company more effective and it's going to make me more productive. And yet also fully a third said, this is going to threaten my job. And probably, and I think the time frame was like rather immediately, like in the next 6 to 12 months. April, you look all the time at the research. You conduct the research on change in organizations, internal communications. What are you seeing in terms of the research, the trends of adoption, openness to some of the things that Joao and Dan were just discussing?
Yeah, I think there's an overestimation on how enthusiastic, open, and receptive that comm professionals are about adopting AI in their workflow. Yeah. Many of the research out there, including some of my own, showed that the fear of being replaced by AI and the self-esteem concerns are some of the biggest hurdles to AI adoption. AI does not affect all employees in the same way, right? So employees with low job skills and domain knowledge, they tend to be more resistant to AI adoption. And this is because now with AI being able to perform some of the repetitive low-level work, these employees are feeling more and more pressure to engage in higher level strategic creative thinking, which they may not yet be equipped to have the skill and knowledge to do so yet. So these employees are more worried about being replaced by AI. And also, research shows that individuals' personality traits do affect how they react to technology adoption. I'm sure a lot of us here know the big 5 personality traits, and some of the recent research shows that employees ranking high on openness personality trait are more likely to view AI as a helpful tool and assistance. But on the flip side, employees who rank high on conscientiousness are less likely to be open to adopting AI in the workplace because, conscientiousness is a good thing and is usually considered, employees who perform well and perform the best in the company are usually those who are considered to have high conscientiousness. But in that particular study, it shows that employees who are high on conscientiousness are less likely to adopt AI because those are the employees who prefer to take control over their own workflow rather than just giving it to AI or co-working with AI. I think just to overcome the general psychological resistance to adopting AI at work, there are 2 things that organizations can prioritize. One of that is to focus on reskilling and upskilling their workforce so that employees and AI can truly work in a complementary way. And the second part is to really identify what is the root cause of employees' psychological resistance, whether it is because they are fearful of being replaced by AI or they just don't trust AI in performing some of the strategic high-level creative work. And a recent research also shows that AI adoption can trigger employees' self-esteem concerns, which actually discourage employees from adopting AI.
And by that you mean, so like if I lean on AI, it could be a signal to others that I'm less competent or capable or what have you.
Exactly, and the research also suggests, one thing to overcome this is that managers should encourage employees to engage in some of the positive self-affirmations and also avoid overselling the promise of intelligent machines.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And I couldn't help but notice, Joao, when you were talking about that extra 30%, I mean, first of all, I admire your humanistic view on that, because that's what we keep on telling folks. Like, look, if you don't adopt AI, you're probably not gonna be replaced by a robot, you're gonna be replaced by somebody who is. Yeah. And that's a very humanistic view, frankly. The more sort of mechanical, financial, or even cynical view would be, great, you got that extra 30%, you could cut a third of those people. How is that, hearing what April just said about the resistance that people had and your apparent optimism and humanism in rolling out AI, how is your team responding to this, what is no longer a pilot, but like actually a program?
I think we're making progress. There's two dimensions to this. One is, I think, is just understanding, and one is easier than the other. The first one I say is understanding AI, particularly GenAI, and its potential to just make your life easier. And I think a lot of people get that. The majority, I think, of our teams use GenAI tools, depending on exactly what they're doing, to accelerate their work and accelerate their productivity. I think there's a different dimension, which is a little bit more complicated, that gets into change management, more profound change management, which is if you don't have to spend a lot of your time making progress with your tactical work, what does that say about your job description? Where do you actually going to spend most of your time on, right? And what the transition we've been trying to make in our team is, again, strategy, analytics, understand analytics much better, because we now have this great tool that we call Sentinel, where people can go in and understand every day, right? 24/7, are we on strategy or are we not? So that requires two things. One is just their willingness to digest analytics, right, on a daily basis. The same way as 20 years ago, you used to come in the office and read the newspapers. Now they have to go in the dashboard and understand the analytics of the day. So that's not easy, because a lot of people, let's face it, a lot of folks in comms they're not very close to analytics, right? Yeah. It's not the skill that we see in all our teams members. So that's a part of it. And then I think the other piece is translating insights from the analytics into strategy, which I think is another skill that not a whole lot of people have. So we're talking about a huge transition, going from, taking advantage of productivity, yes, more or less a given, making progress, not fully there, but kind of a given. Much more complicated is, how do I think strategy and analytics on a daily basis much more than before, right? Avoiding the proverbial jumping into tactics that our teams oftentimes do. And that is a lot more complicated, and I wish I would have a really strong answer for you right now.
Somebody in this room has that for you. So if you have that answer for Joao, please find him after the session. Dan, you've encountered many teams who are trying to pull that use of AI and tools into that strategic level. What would be some examples that you would offer?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that AI can prove the impact of communications like never before. A big reason that I moved from being a practitioner to a founder was that I had this idea that wouldn't it be amazing in that every quarterly earnings script you'd have a reputation score, because reputation is 85% of a company's value. You've all seen that HBR study. So wouldn't it be amazing if we could quantify the impact? And for the longest time, communications teams have walked into a room with sales and marketing and IR, and they haven't necessarily been able to quantify their impact. Sales has the revenue numbers. Marketing has all their metrics about the amount of people that saw the billboard. IR can say the stock price is good, and the comms person says, look at this great piece in the Financial Times. Yeah. And what I think is really encouraging about what Joao was talking about is being able to quantify the impact of a strategy vis-a-vis your competitive set, and being able to prove impact over time. Now, of course, there's static metrics like surveys that continue to be valuable, particularly on audience analysis that's hard to get to. But for the first time, we're able to show the aggregate impact of everything we're doing, from CSR commitments to messaging to executive moments to earnings calls. So a few examples that I've seen go quite well. I'm from Boston, born and raised, so if you guys need recommendations on restaurants or rotaries, I'm happy to make advice. But a great company here in Boston is called Easy Cater. Easy Cater started out as a catering company, literally started by a grandmother, and it's close to being one of the hot tech IPOs of the next year. Easy Cater is trying to make a transition from being a catering platform that your mom and pop sandwich shop would use to being seen as this entire Workday-like platform for large enterprises. And so they're using AI to figure out, okay, what does our competitive set look like now? It's no longer like DoorDash, maybe it's more like Salesforce. And so we need to map certain topics like AI agents and GenAI interfaces for our customers to understand the best way to position our new innovative offerings to be perceived as a tech company so that their IPO pops off. Another example would be a big consulting firm. We work with KPMG. They are called in to do audits all the time. And so they're using AI and some of the systems that we provide, though not entirely, to quantify trust. They want to be able to look through a financial statement or an operational footprint and understand to what degree there are, labor concerns, sourcing concerns, sustainability concerns, so that they can have, aside from financial metrics, a very precise understanding of how trustworthy that company is. So there's a bunch of different examples out there, but fundamentally it starts with the communications team, to Joao's point, embracing measurement as a tool for action.
And so few of us have struggled with measuring communications. That is really powerful. And even if that were the one way, that could be a very powerful way to talk about getting to a more strategic use of AI. April, you've seen the adoption of AI rollout. I would pose a similar question to you. Are you seeing some examples where AI is being used in novel, interesting, more strategic ways?
Absolutely. I think we need to remember one of our core functions is manage relationship and reputation, and to think about how generative AI can help us deliver on that, right? So many research right now have been done, especially in the marketing field, on the impact of AI-driven chatbots and how that can be used as a tool to minimize relationship risks when interacting with consumers and customers. One piece of research that just came out, published, showed that in certain circumstances, AI-powered chatbots function better than human agents. So for example, customers react better to AI-powered chatbots when giving a less than expected marketing deal, because they don't view AI's behavior as being particularly selfish. On the flip side—
Well, I'm not sure if I quite followed that. I mean, I think I did, but I want to make sure that everybody gets that.
Yeah.
So like, if there is an offer made that is not a super compelling offer, and it's offered by a human, it might be received worse or less effective than if it were offered by a chatbot.
That's exactly what the study showed. This is because humans attribute less intentionality on AI's behavior, so they don't view the worst offer being made by AI as being particularly selfish. But also, if an AI presents a better than expected offer, they also don't view it as being particularly kind. So when you have a better than expected offer, it's more beneficial to convey that through a human agent than an AI agent. And another thing I would like to highlight from research is that how generative AI is impacting creativity. A recent research published in one of the sciences journals showed that writers who use generative AI with fiction writing are perceived to be more creative in their storytelling than writers who did not use generative AI to generate ideas for fiction writing. However, the same study also showed, and this is the caveat, that even though generative AI boosts the individual writer's creativity, they found that the collective creativity decreased. So in other words, the stories look very similar to each other than the stories generated by human. So I think this has huge implications to the creative field as a whole, because even though you see increase in individuals' creativity, maybe teams' creativity, but it might be damaging to the collective creativity as a field, leading to less diversity in thinking and storytelling.
Yeah. I see you nodding your head. Was there something that you wanted to add to that?
Well, I think it's so interesting how the AI discussion is like living in a parallel world, I might say, between the creative and the strategic use cases. So many of us in the room, we interact with AI systems in a creative context. We interact with GenAI, which is good at predicting the next pixel and the next word and the next note or the next frame of video. And that's because it's vectorizing, it's figuring out through data points where that word is closest to the next word, right? And I think it's so interesting where in my world, I think a lot about discriminative AI, which is all about tagging and labeling. Is it Amazon the company or Amazon the rainforest? Nike the company or Nike the shoes? Starbucks the company, Starbucks that you're ordering? And what I think is going to be so important is using the combination of those two to figure out where the human voice continues to persist as we adopt AI in this discussion. So using discriminative AI, we might be able to determine whether or not that idea truly did come from a human being, just like we can assess whether or not a college essay was written by a robot or a student at this point.
I was just about to say to April, as somebody who I know grades many papers, are you finding that you're getting submissions that kind of, are clearly produced by LLMs?
Yeah, it was pretty easy to detect who's
In
using
conclusion,
AI.
it's like, okay,
the
we've seen that.
references are totally wrong, and it's not factual at all.
Yeah.
But I think this has huge implications for corporate communications because we exist in this sea of sameness, right? What company out there hasn't committed to going net zero by 2035 or 2050?
Yeah.
The key thing is to be highly specific with an authentic, ownable proof point. Joao, you certainly talked to me about this a lot, with how we are pursuing that widely aspired to goal.
Yeah.
And only human beings can make a decision in terms of how to do that. I wouldn't trust AI at this point to differentiate me. It would just give me options to differentiate. And it's so important with what you're saying to understand that maybe you're getting more creative output, but you also have to have that spider sense in the back of your head that maybe I'm just being pushed in the same direction as everyone else.
Yeah, I do want to talk about, so we started to raise the specter of some risks for a moment there. I want to share a couple stats. This is from some research that we'll be publishing with the Harris Poll in the next week or so. Organizations, so you probably don't actually know how your employees are using AI. And what we found was that 69% of those whose companies use or license AI tools have used them for work on their personal computers, which may or may not be compliant with guidelines. 70% of those whose companies have policies or guidelines for the use of AI have used them for work on their personal computers. And then, sorry, I repeated that. 64% use both personal and work computers. 22% use it only on their work computers, and 14% only on their personal computers. So what we're finding essentially is that many people don't know whether or not their organization has a policy. If they do know that they have a policy, whether or not there's a license for the tools that have been offered, they're using tools. You might be, we're seeing people in our research who are saying, I'm basically doing work on open AIs. So I'm like going to ChatGPT, even if my company doesn't allow it or license it or what have you, in order to get my work done. So this is happening now rather significantly. That is just one of the risks. How are you right now, Joao, how are you thinking about contending with some of the known risks like out of policy use, leaking confidential information, hallucinations, and so on?
Yeah. Well, it's work in progress, right? And I think we're trying to uncover two things. One is GenAI misinformation risk just another manifestation of the risk that we already have with social media? So any given day, right, there's a lot of falsehoods written about any of our companies. You know, if the company is large enough, you're going to go on Twitter, you're going to see all sorts of things written about your company. What we have seen is that usually, at least from our experience, is that usually stakeholders don't kind of pay a lot of attention to that, right? There's not a whole lot of engagement with some of the most absurd falsehoods. So is GenAI misinformation just another manifestation of that, or is it going to be bigger? I don't have an answer just yet, actually. We've been trying to do a lot of research. Our cybersecurity team is on this, on and on. We're obviously monitoring this and trying to see, and we've actually had a risk meeting this week, and we talked about the risk of GenAI. We're flagging, we're monitoring, we're trying to gather the data. I think it's my personal opinion. It's just a personal opinion with not a whole lot of data. I think there's a potential, of course, for once deep fakes get good enough, you might actually have a big issue.
Yeah, and they're pretty good right now.
Yeah,
it's not Will Smith eating spaghetti anymore. Yeah.
So I think what we haven't seen yet is a deliberate attack on corporations, one that is strong enough to get us all in our heels and say, "Oops." Yeah, this is concerning, but I think we just might. And one of these days, we're probably going to have to change our issues management frameworks and communications, crisis communications and whatnot, to deal a lot more profoundly with this than we have been with social media so far.
Yeah, April, how are you seeing? Does the research reflect yet this sort of big trade-off, this bargain that we have to make between the risk of adoption and the risk of being late to the game?
I don't think so. I think the research at this point has mostly focused on the psychological side of how employees respond to new technology adoption. Yeah. So in terms of like the regulation policy-wise, I think there are some legal researchers doing AI-related, research, but then not from the communication perspective. I haven't seen a lot of research on this.
Yeah. What are you, when you think about that trade-off, that risk of adoption versus, like early adoption versus being late to the show and, trying to navigate that, is there a framework that you think through, that you talk with your teams about, or that you would recommend to us?
Rather than a framework, I think about it as an opportunity. Put it this way, I'm a practitioner in comms who failed algebra, like many of you in this room. Unlike many of you in this room, I failed it like 4 times in a row, and then I went on to a D- in geometry. So if I can work in this space, I'm quite confident almost anybody could. I think what's very exciting for me is for the longest time, communications hasn't necessarily been seen as the vanguard of innovation, let alone the most data-driven function. And with AI, because of how customizable it is, I would argue, and I've seen, that communications teams are the leading function when it comes to adopting the tangible end-to-end business uses of AI. Whether that is training the key specific topics of your corporate narrative, figuring out what data sources you can use to measure your core values on a day-to-day basis, not an individual point in time, and having real-time feedback both before you put a message out into the world and afterwards to understand the impact that you're making. Where I see hesitancy is that for the longest time, communications folks have been afraid of being graded, right? Our metric of success is like land that piece, get a quote in the above the fold sort of rank, and we now have an opportunity to go after what we all are hoping to do as communicators, which is fewer, deeper storylines, higher quality, higher impact, and less about the volume bazooka out there. When it comes to concerns, there are many. It's the first time that I had trained an AI system was only a few years ago, and I saw firsthand the bias when you click yes, no, and you're training a topic, whether it's recognizing a press release or thought leadership, or figuring out whether or not this is actually about vaccine giveaways or cell therapy in the biotech world. That can really give folks an opportunity to bias the data. That's why it's so important to have a back-end system where you're seeing every individual data point, like literally articles, social media posts, regulatory documents, so you can be sure that the insights that you're getting are grounded in real hard truths and not hallucinations.
I want to quickly say something about how this is manifesting at my firm with my team, and we have very enthusiastic adopters of AI across the board. Some of that is pretty tactical. Like, we're able to do creative briefs in visual language in a way that we couldn't before. We were typing these detailed creative briefs and then asking a designer to read them. Now we type a detailed creative brief and it's accompanied by a really good version, like that approximates what we want, and we can talk in the visual language to our designers because we've created a rendering of the thing we want, but they're going to go do it for real and do it better. We have added it to our workflows, like with transcripts and summarization and these kind of things, and yet also there's a huge pressure on the business model of agencies. I remember Evan Krause standing up, I want to say it was at last year's PageUp annual conference, saying like, well, wait, if this is going to accelerate how quickly we can work, and we're, time and materials, wait, shouldn't that go up rather than down in terms of the value we're creating? So there's fundamental questions about the business models of communications that are also in play. We've got time for a super speedy lightning round in 1 or 2 sentences, starting with you, Joao. How do you envision the role of data and AI evolving the responsibility of communications leaders?
Yeah, I have a fundamental issue with communications being a supporting function, so-called. I think communications is a business function. I don't see myself supporting anyone. I see myself as a business leader in the room, the same as anyone else. I try to tell my team to do exactly that. I think what AI can do, AI systems as a whole, because of all the potential in helping us to be more strategic, measuring analytics, they can be a competitive, they can bring us that competitive advantage to be there, right? Yes. And to show the impact that we drive.
As a leader. Fabulous. April, same question. How will AI and data transform communications leadership?
Yeah, I'd say change is really happening at lightning speed. No matter you're for or against GenAI, it is important for leaders to engage in continuous learning. Be always open-minded and curious in this process, experimenting things with your team, listening to your employees and addressing their needs and concerns so that you can foster a culture of just openness to technology and as well as learning.
Yeah, thank you. Dan, you get the last word.
Proving your impact, helping your teams operate more efficiently is absolutely critical. But I think even better, what I've seen is data and AI deployed correctly can be a convening force, can put comms at the center of the table, and whether it's marketing, investor relations, operations, or sales, give you a leadership role with objective proof for the why behind the what that you're recommending.
Joao, April, Dan, thank you for sharing your expertise and your experience with us. I invite everybody to give them a round of applause. Thank you so much.